The champagne glass trembled in my sister Brielle's perfectly manicured fingers as she raised it high above the crowded restaurant table. "My little sister Skylar here even tried the army once," she announced with a theatrical laugh that cut through my soul like shattered glass. "Could not even make it through basic training. Now she shuffles papers at some government office." The Pentagon executive sitting across from her, Director Harrison Vale, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His eyes flickered toward me with an expression I could not quite read. Brielle continued her performance, oblivious to the tectonic shift happening right beneath her designer heels. But we all find our level, right? What my brilliant sister did not realize was that she had just dismissed my entire military career to the very man I was scheduled to brief at the Pentagon the next morning. What she could not know was that the paper-shuffling failure sitting quietly in the corner was actually Colonel Skylar Reed, lead investigator for Operation Iron Curtain. The same operation that had been investigating her defense contracting firm for selling classified targeting data to foreign agents. The air in the federal courtroom 6 months later was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of floor polish and anxiety. I watched Brielle, the family's golden child who always believed her brilliance made her invincible, sitting beside her expensive lawyer. She whispered with the same smug confidence that had turned my stomach that night at dinner. The bailiff, Master Sergeant Rodriguez with a jaw set in granite, entered and his voice boomed across the chamber. "All rise." The judge gave a curt nod. The prosecutor, Major Chen, whose uniform was pressed to absolute perfection, stood to address the court with a clipped, formal tone. "Your Honor, before we proceed, the government would like to acknowledge the presence of the convening authority for this general court-martial." The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a sound like thunder. I saw the flicker of confusion on Brielle's face. A brief moment of curiosity before the bailiff's voice cut through the silence like a blade, announcing the Deputy Commander, U.S. Army Cyber Command, Brigadier General Skylar Reed. I watched the smirk on her face, the one she had worn my entire life, simply melt away like ice in summer sun. Her skin went pale, stark white against her designer suit. Her mouth fell open as her world tilted completely off its axis. She saw me, truly saw me, for the very first time. But that look of pure shock did not begin in the courtroom. It began 15 years earlier under the suffocating weight of family expectations. To understand the woman who walked into that courtroom, you have to understand the girl she was forced to leave behind. My entire life was built on a foundation of dual realities. The one my family constructed for me, and the one I built for myself in complete silence. The family narrative was cemented on a hot Sunday afternoon in June, the summer I turned 18. We were gathered in our living room, the air thick with the scent of my mother's pot roast and my father's suffocating pride. My sister Brielle, the golden child destined for greatness, had just received her official acceptance letter to an Ivy League business school. My father, Marcus Reed, a man who valued the shine of success far more than the grit it took to achieve it, was practically glowing. He presented her with a wrapped set of keys, the bow glistening under the lamplight. A brand new luxury sedan sat in the driveway, a 4,000-pound trophy declaring her worth to the entire neighborhood. My mother, Diana Reed, a woman who treated my father's approval like the family's North Star, clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, Brielle, it is absolutely perfect. Your path is so much clearer now, so much safer." It was a direct comparison. A subtle but sharp jab meant just for me. An hour earlier, I had tried to share my own news. I stood there in my crisp ROTC uniform, holding a letter that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I had been awarded a slot at officer candidate school, a position so competitive I had not even let myself dream of it. My father had patted me on the back with a hollow, dismissive gesture. "That is nice, honey. Just be careful." He did not ask what it meant. He did not ask about the training, the leadership, the commitment. He saw a hobby, a dangerous phase. Later, my mother handed me an envelope. Inside was a $50 gift certificate to a bookstore. The internal ledger clicked over, adding another entry. A luxury car for the daughter with the clear path, and a bookstore voucher for the one taking a strange, embarrassing detour. I felt the pride I had carried all day curdle in my stomach, replaced by a cold, heavy resignation. This, I thought to myself, is my place. This is what they think I am worth. Now contrast that memory with my reality 15 years later. The setting was not a warm, sunlit living room, but a cold, sterile SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility buried deep within Fort Gordon. The only sound was the low hum of servers processing secrets that could topple governments. I stood at the head of a mahogany table, a full colonel in the United States Army, the lead investigator for a counterintelligence probe codenamed Operation Iron Curtain. My audience was not my dismissive father, but a 3-star general with more command experience than my father had years on this earth. He did not pat me on the back. He listened, his eyes locked on mine, absorbing every word with laser focus. The initial signal's intelligence is undeniable, sir, I stated, my voice steady and echoing slightly in the secure room. The data breach originated from their internal servers, not an outside threat. We believe a senior executive is selling proprietary targeting data directly to a hostile foreign intelligence service. I pointed to a complex network chart on the screen, a web of deceit I had spent months carefully untangling. The Uniform Code of Military Justice gives us full jurisdiction because they are operating under a Title X contract. Their corruption is a direct threat to our personnel deployed overseas. There were no condescending smiles, no pats on the head. There was only the quiet, intense respect of professionals engaged in a high-stakes mission that could save American lives. The general looked at my analysis, then back at me with complete focus. "What do you need, Colonel?" he asked. His question was not a dismissal. It was a blank check of trust and authority. I felt a sense of belonging in that cold, windowless room that I had never once felt in the house I grew up in. This was my world. This was my value. That feeling was shattered by a simple phone call a few weeks later. My mother's number flashed on my phone, and I answered with the practiced calm I had perfected over the years. "Skylar, you should be more like your sister," she began, her voice bright and completely oblivious to reality. "She is invited to a gala in Brussels. Her company is flying the whole family out first class. It is so glamorous." I looked around my sparse, functional office, the walls covered in classified operational maps. Glamorous was not the word for it. "When are you going to settle down from that temp job of yours and find something real?" A temp job? I was managing an operation with a budget in the tens of millions, overseeing personnel across 3 continents, and briefing the highest levels of military command. And my own mother thought I was working a temp job. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. She was excited about a party in a city whose security I was partially responsible for maintaining. A city that was safe because of people like me doing these supposedly unreal jobs. The conversation was just another reminder of the chasm between their perception and my reality. It was a chasm I had long since stopped trying to bridge. For 15 years, I had accepted the narrative. I let them believe I was the quiet failure. It was easier than trying to explain a world they could never comprehend. But when the primary target of Operation Iron Curtain was identified, I realized the 2 worlds were about to collide in the most spectacular way possible. The target was my sister, Brielle. The moment I saw Brielle's name on the primary target list for Operation Iron Curtain, a cold, clinical clarity washed over me like ice water. The tangled emotions of 15 years, the hurt, the frustration, the quiet resentment, receded completely, replaced by the sharp, clean lines of duty and honor. My first action was to walk into the office of my commanding officer, General Nathaniel Morrison, a man who saw soldiers, not sons and daughters, and who valued integrity above all else. I laid out the situation completely, formally stating my personal connection to the target and the potential for a conflict of interest. I was prepared to be recused, to hand the case over and walk away from everything. General Morrison listened without interruption, his gaze steady and unwavering. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment that felt like an eternity. "Colonel," he finally said, his voice firm and decisive, "your intimate knowledge of the players is not a conflict. It is a strategic asset. You will remain in command of the operational side of this investigation." He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine with absolute intensity. "The prosecution will be handled by JAG. Your job is to deliver them an airtight case, free of any reasonable doubt. This will be done completely by the book. Is that understood?" His words were not just an order. They were a profound vote of confidence in my professionalism over my personal history. My response was not a dramatic phone call to my sister. There were no tearful confrontations or angry accusations. My war was fought in complete silence, with the stroke of a pen and the weight of evidence. My fury was channeled into flawless forensic reports. Each time I signed a warrant or authorized a subpoena, it was a move in a chess game she did not even know she was playing. I spent my nights under the harsh fluorescent lights of my office, reviewing digital evidence logs with my cyber teams and coordinating with the JAG prosecutors. We ensured every single piece of evidence against her was absolutely unimpeachable, logged meticulously under the correct articles of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. My actions were precise, unemotional, and utterly unstoppable. One rainy Tuesday morning, my aide, Chief Warrant Officer Davis, a man of few words but absolute competence, entered my office and placed a single document on my desk. "Ma'am," he said with the slightest hint of a smile, "the promotion board results are in. You have been selected." My eyes scanned the page, and the words seemed to lift off the paper like magic. Promotion to Brigadier General, effective immediately. It was not just a career milestone. It was the final critical piece of the puzzle falling perfectly into place. The promotion meant I would become the convening authority, the officer with the ultimate power to approve the court-martial against my own sister. The system I had dedicated my life to, the one my family had mocked and dismissed, was about to hand me the scales of justice. The case file grew thicker by the day, a monument of digital evidence and sworn testimony. Brielle hired a team of expensive corporate lawyers who thought they were fighting a routine business lawsuit. They had absolutely no idea they were preparing for war against a system they did not understand, led by a general they never saw coming. The day of reckoning arrived not with a storm, but with the chilling, sterile silence of a general court-martial. The chamber at the Washington Navy Yard was a place built to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, flags standing like stoic soldiers in the corners, and the Great Seal of the United States looming over the judge's bench like a watchful eye. It was a room that reeked of tradition and consequence. From my designated waiting area, I could picture the scene perfectly. My sister Brielle would be sitting at the defendant's table, radiating an aura of profound annoyance. She would not look scared. She would look inconvenienced, as if this whole affair was a tedious legal pothole on her gilded highway to success. Her expensive lawyers would be whispering false reassurances, feeding the delusion that this was just another corporate battle she could win with money and connections. And in the gallery, my parents would be sitting ramrod straight, projecting an image of unwavering support for their brilliant, unfairly accused daughter. I knew with a certainty forged over decades of invisibility that they would be scanning the public seating area. They would be looking for me for Skylar. They would expect to see me slip in wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, my face etched with worry for my poor sister. They were there to offer moral support against what they had called a ridiculous corporate misunderstanding, completely oblivious to the fact that the misunderstanding was, and always had been, entirely their own. They were waiting for the black sheep, but a wolf was at the door. The trial began, and I could hear the muffled sounds through the heavy wooden doors. The lead prosecutor, the same disciplined major I had worked with in countless briefings, would be laying out the case with the cold, irrefutable precision of a surgeon. He would speak of procurement fraud, of data exfiltration, of a conspiracy that threatened national security. He would mention the name of the investigation, Operation Iron Curtain. I could imagine the first flicker of genuine unease on Brielle's face as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Then the major would state that the entire complex operation had been conceived and overseen by one of the Army's top cyber warfare commanders. He would use my operational title, a name that meant absolutely nothing to my family. Commander, Task Force Sentinel. It was a ghost, a title without a face, just more military jargon to them. Then came the pause, the moment designed for maximum impact. The bailiff would announce that the convening authority for the trial would be observing the day's proceedings. I stood outside those doors, my heart a slow, steady drum in my chest. I smoothed the front of my Army service uniform, the iconic dress blues that represented everything I had earned. I was not doing this for revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was justice, cold, clean, and final. This was a correction of the record that had been 15 years in the making. This was for the oath I swore and the uniform I had earned. Ribbon by silent ribbon. The bailiff's voice echoed as he opened the doors wide. All rise. Announcing the Deputy Commander, U.S. Army Cyber Command, Brigadier General Schuyler Reed. I stepped through that doorway and into the light. The first thing that happened was the sound. A sudden sharp scrape of chairs as the entire room, including the judge, snapped to attention in perfect unison. The air became thick with a sudden, deferred silence that seemed to press against my chest. I let my eyes sweep the room for a fraction of a second. I saw the prosecutor, the defense team, the jury of decorated senior officers. I saw my immaculate reflection in the polished wood of the witness stand. The single silver star on each of my shoulders felt as heavy as an anchor, holding me steady in this moment I had waited 15 years to experience. My ribbon rack, a silent testament to deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen other places they never knew I had been, told the story of my life in vivid, undeniable color. Then I allowed myself to look at them. Brielle's face was a canvas of collapsing realities. It was not simple shock. It was a multi-stage detonation of her entire worldview. First came confusion. Why is Schuyler in a uniform? Then a flicker of cognitive dissonance as her brain tried to reconcile the washout from her stories with the high-ranking officer standing before her. Finally, a wave of bone-white horror washed over her features as the truth hit her like a physical blow to the chest. The name, the title, the rank. It all connected in one soul-crushing moment of absolute clarity. Her jaw hung open like a broken gate. Her carefully constructed arrogance shattered into a million pieces right there in front of everyone. My gaze drifted to my father. This man who prided himself on his 2 years as a draftee in the 1960s, who loved to tell stories about respecting the chain of command, was lurching to his feet. It was not a choice. It was a clumsy, involuntary reaction. His body snapping into a pathetic version of attention, before his mind could even process why. He was standing for me, not for his daughter but for my rank. The ultimate, undeniable show of respect, forced upon him by the very institution he had belittled me for joining. I did not look at my mother. I did not need to see her face to know that her world was crumbling just as completely. I kept my eyes forward, my expression a mask of professional neutrality. I walked with a steady, measured pace to my designated seat, gave a crisp, respectful nod to the judge, and sat down with perfect military bearing. My very presence in that chair was the final piece of evidence against her. My sister had always seen me as small, insignificant, beneath her notice. In that courtroom, surrounded by the weight and authority of the United States military, she finally saw me for my true size. The trial concluded not with a bang, but with the quiet final scratch of a pen on official documents. After the jury of her new peers, a panel of grim-faced, decorated colonels, delivered a guilty verdict on all counts, a clerk brought the official findings to my desk. As the convening authority, the final word was mine alone. I picked up the heavy government-issue pen, and for a moment, the weight of my entire life seemed to be concentrated in that single point of metal and ink. I saw the ghost of the girl receiving a $50 gift certificate while her sister got a luxury car. I saw the young officer being patted on the head and told to be careful. I saw the colonel being dismissed as someone who worked a temp job. Then I saw the general whose duty was crystal clear. My signature was firm, decisive, a simple, clean line that changed everything. The ledger was finally balanced. I rose from my seat and walked out of that courtroom without a single backward glance. I did not need to see my family huddled together in their shared shock and isolation. Their chapter in my life was over, and the book was now permanently closed. In the hallway, General Morrison was waiting for me. He looked at me with his expression unreadable as always, but his eyes held a deep, quiet respect that spoke volumes. "Outstanding work, General," he said, his voice low and clean. That single word, General, was worth more than 1,000 apologies from my family. It was the highest praise one professional could give another, an acknowledgement of difficult duty performed with absolute integrity. "It was my duty, sir," I replied, and the words felt truer than any I had ever spoken in my life. 1 year can change absolutely everything. The silence that followed the trial was not empty. It was filled with work, with purpose, with a peace I had never known existed. 1 year to the day after that court-martial, I stood on a different kind of stage under much warmer lights. I was at the graduation ceremony for the U.S. Army War College, addressing the next generation of America's senior military leaders. A sea of colonels and newly minted generals, the best and brightest in the armed forces, looked up at me as I delivered the keynote address that would shape their careers. My family had always valued the loudest voice in the room, the flashiest display of success. But I had learned that true power lies in quiet authority, and earned respect rather than demanded attention. Command, I told them, my voice calm and steady, carrying easily across the packed auditorium, is not a prize to be won. It is a burden to be carried with honor. In the digital battlefields of the 21st century, your integrity will be your only impenetrable armor. Your ethics will be your most effective weapon. I spoke of the silent sacrifices, the lonely decisions, and the moral courage required to lead when no one is watching, when no one will ever know the choices you made in the darkness. I was not just giving a speech. I was telling my own story in a language they all understood. I was sharing the lessons learned in the quiet, unseen corners of my life, where character is truly forged. And in that hall, surrounded by those who understood the weight of service, I felt more seen and heard than ever before in my life. This was my legacy, not one of blood or family obligation, but of service, honor, and the courage to do what is right even when it costs everything. After the ceremony, I was surrounded not by fawning sycophants seeking favors, but by my peers, my true family. They did not offer empty praise or meaningless flattery. They engaged with my ideas, debating the finer points of cyber warfare ethics, and sharing their own hard-won experiences from the field. We were a family forged not by biological accident, but by shared purpose and deep mutual respect earned through years of service and sacrifice. My trusted aide, Colonel Davis, no longer a chief warrant officer, his own excellence having carried him forward, made his way through the crowd of officers. "A word, General?" he asked, handing me a secure tablet with the practiced efficiency I had come to rely on. An urgent operational update flickered on the screen, demanding my immediate attention. I was immediately absorbed, my focus shifting seamlessly from the ceremony to the mission at hand. I was completely in my element, a leader among leaders, absolutely at home in this world I had built for myself. It was in that moment of quiet contentment that my personal phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. I pulled it out, half distracted by the operational update, and saw a text message from a number I had not heard from in exactly 1 year. It was my mother. The message was short. A lifetime of regret and desperation compressed into a few carefully chosen words. "Skylar, we are so proud of you. We just never knew. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, and for a fleeting second, I felt the ghost of an old pain, a faint echo of the little girl who would have given absolutely anything to read those words 15 years ago. But it was just that, an echo. The feeling passed, replaced by a calm, settled peace that ran deeper than any childhood wound. I realized their pride, their acknowledgement, their desperate need for reconciliation. It was no longer a currency I had any use for. My worth had been forged and validated elsewhere, in places they could never reach or understand. I slid the phone back into my pocket without replying, the screen going dark, the message left unread and unanswered. I placed it face down on the table and turned back to my team, to my real family, to the work that gave my life meaning. My peace was finally my own. It was no longer theirs to give, and it was no longer theirs to take away. My family had believed a legacy was defined by a name they recognized, by wealth they could see, by status they could show off to their friends. I learned that a true legacy is defined by the uniform you earn and the authority it represents. It is measured in lives saved, missions accomplished, and the quiet satisfaction of duty performed with honor. It is built in the shadows and revealed only when the moment demands it. Sometimes the person they dismiss as a failure becomes the one who holds their fate in her hands. Sometimes the daughter they made feel worthless becomes the general who signs their judgment. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not in their apology, but in no longer needing it. If this story of hidden strength and ultimate justice inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of triumph over family betrayal. Your support helps us bring you stories that prove true power comes not from their approval, but from the strength you build when they are not watching. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of warriors who refuse to be underestimated.